This is the web application exercise in C#. I have the solution open in Visual Studio along with the README file. Our goal is to create and run a web application from local IIS. I actually won't run it through IIS. That's the second objective. If you're interested in that, I may make a video in the future about that, but that might be good for you to do some research on your own, how to figure out how to enable IIS on your local computer and get the website, the web application to run on your local computer. Let's look down at objective 1. We've got the solution open already, so I don't need to worry about that. Our target app is web app, and we can see that it's in bold. That means it's going to be the application or the project that runs whenever I hit HTTP, this big button up here, or if I hit F5. It's the same thing. It runs it in debug mode. The bold application is the main application that runs. We're going to implement our use case, given the user navigates to the home page of the application, so the home screen. When the user enters text into a form and submits it, so imagine there's a text box where they'll type something and a button where they'll click, the system will then display the reverse of that text that was entered. So this is our reverse functionality that we're doing in all the different program types. We're doing it with a web application instead this time. We'll run our tests as we typically do, and then we'll make sure that once we debug the application that it works, we can see it visibly. We can test the application that way. So let's start off. I'm going to do a build solution, so build solution. Look down at the bottom left down here, it says build started, build succeeded. So we're good there. Now I'm going to open up the test, expand, and go ahead and run this. We should get a failure, and we do. So the failure we're getting is around request verification token. I'll take a quick aside on this. The request verification token is something that was introduced in certain web frameworks, and the idea is to prevent cross-site scripting. So the goal is, or the way this works is when a page is requested from a web application or website, the website will send a hidden value called a request verification token into a hidden field on the page somewhere. You won't see it, it's not visible, it's hidden to the user, but it appears in the HTML. Then when we post the information back to the web page, we include that request verification token. The reason we do that is so that the web server can make sure that it generated the page and that the request isn't coming from somewhere else. That was the idea behind it. Turns out it's pretty easy to defeat, but unfortunately that still sticks around in some cases, so we do need to work through that a little bit. So let's look at our test. Go ahead and click on this link here for the actual test file. Looking at our test, what we're doing is we're creating a browser emulator. So this is a class I created. Think of it as something that emulates a browser. It pretends like it's a browser, makes web requests, both gets and posts. And it does that in a way that doesn't actually render any UI. So we get the HTML back and we can interrogate the HTML as a string, but it's not going to render anything to the user. So we will say get the home page, so the / is the root URL of whatever domain we're on. So the domain typically we ignore in web applications. We're simply saying get the home page of this web application. That's what the / means. The / says go all the way to the root and no page after that. We're then getting the request verification token and we're posting data back to the home page. So we'll post form data to the home page. The values we're going to send are the value or the name text and the value of testing. So this is pretending the user actually typed the word testing into a text box called text with a name of text. Then we're also going to send back that request verification token. The name of that is __ request verification token. So that posts the information back, gives us our response. From our response, we're making sure that we have an OK status code, that's a 200. And we're also making sure that the content itself, which is a string, contains the word testing in reverse, which is the inverse or the reverse of what we typed in on line 12 here. So this is failing. This is failing because of the request verification token. And really the request verification token in Razor Pages, which is the framework we're using today, happens automatically if you create a form. So there's not much that we have to do other than create a form. So let's look now. We need to find the home page. The home page is typically going to be a file called index. It also might be called default. There's a couple other names that you may see, but index is the most common. So if we look in the web app project under pages, here's index. And so this is what we would expect to map to the root URL to the home page. So I look at this file, we can see that it's not doing much. We have a header 1, bold text right at the top of the page that says welcome, and then a paragraph tag that says learn about building web apps in ASP.NET Core with an anchor tag, so a link, a hyperlink to Microsoft's website. So no form, no text box, no button, we need to add those. Let's look at the code behind. So I'm going to expand index. We can see index.cshtml.cs. This is the C# or code behind page for that file. Here's our page model for index. And we can see we've got a couple of properties. So I've seeded this a little bit. I've helped you out. If you're not sure how Razor Pages works, this is a good time to do an internet search on C# Razor Pages example form post. That should get you started and get you some example code to see basically how to do this. Effectively, what we need to do, we've got our get, and it's just returning the page itself, which is good. We don't need to worry about that. It's the post that we need to make sure works. In order to do this, in the index.cshtml file, we're going to need to add a form. And then once we add that form, we need to, zoomed in a little bit, once we add that form, we need to, on post, get the value, reverse it, and display it back to the page, back to the user effectively. So let's start on that. We'll start with a form here. So let's just create a form. By default, the method is a get. We want to post, and we know that because of our test. Our test, if I can get to the test, our test said post form data. So we want to post back to the web page. So we're going to say method is post. Now the default action is the current page, so I don't need to specify the action. However, it doesn't hurt to go ahead and say /, which is the same page itself, but I'm going to leave that off because it is optional since by default it'll go back to my current page. So here's my form. Now a form is an invisible container. It doesn't have any visible UI elements. What we're going to need to add here now is a text box, and we're going to need to add some sort of submit button. So I'll do an input type equals text for a text box, and then we'll say ASP4. So this is a Razor Pages syntax. We're going to say this is for the text property. Now the text property, there's a lot going on with this. I want to walk through the mapping. The text property is going to map to this line 12 property, and that says basically we're going to bind to this text property automatically. We're also going to retrieve from it. So if there was a value the user typed in, we're going to retrieve that and display that back to the user. So this is a two-way binding with this ASP4. In addition to that, the reason we're using text back on the test is we said the name is text. So this needs to map to the name. So it turns out this ASP4 maps to the name as well. So this ASP4 is doing a lot of things for us. So there's our input. This is a self-closing element. We'll add one more. I can either add a button or an input type is submit. I'm going to do an input type is submit. And you could give it a value for the text if you want to. I'll just leave it defaulted. There's our form. So this form now, I should be able to make some progress on my test. All right. Okay, so now we are having a problem that index model get is not implemented. That's on the text property. So now it's failing for a different reason. So I'm going to do this test-driven development. So we need to turn this getter and setter into a full property. I can add a field, but in our case, I'm just going to simply turn this into an automatic property. So it's going to automatically add a field for me behind the scenes. We're not going to worry about that. So let me run the test again, see what our new error is. All right, so now we are getting past the request verification token error, and we're moving on to a not implemented exception that's a part of, now the not implemented exception is here in the on post. So now we need to implement the on post. We have the value in text. What we need to do is set that value to reverse text. So let's just do this. We can do this in a couple of lines. You can do this in a single line, but I'm going to break it out into a couple of lines. We'll say this var text equals this dot text. So that's getting the value that was posted to us. Now we need to reverse the text. So we'll say reverse text equals, we'll do a new string given the text, and we'll say reverse dot tochar array to array. Here we go, there's our reverse. And then finally, we're going to set that to the reverse text. So this dot reverse text equals reverse text. I've got a new problem in that, well, a couple things. First off, actually, let me fix the on post. So the on post, we also need to return this dot page. And then finally, reverse text, we need to set this value. But the problem is this is a get only property with the syntax. So I'm going to turn this into an automatic property, but since we don't need to set it outside of our code behind, I'm going to make it the setter private. So we'll do get private set. We can only set inside this class. So that takes care of all of this. Let's run our test again. All right, so the string does not contain the word testing in reverse, which makes sense because I didn't do anything in the HTML itself to actually display this. So now let's do that. So the model is the index model, the model is the code behind page, so we have that available to us. So now I can use Razor syntax to say if, so we're looking for the reverse text property, if not string dot is null or empty, this not model dot reversed text. So the model is a property on the view itself, and that is the model that we're talking about. So this reverse text property is this reverse text property. So if it's not null or empty, so if it has some value, then what we want to do is display that. So I can put this in a div or a paragraph tag. I'll just create a paragraph tag and say this.model.reversed text. Let's run our test again. And we have a pass. Everything's looking good there. Let's do one more thing really fast. Let's actually run this and see what it looks like in a browser. So I'm going to hit the big green HTTP button up here. I can also hit F5 on the keyboard. That'll do the same thing. This is going to debug the application. Let me drag it over. All right, so here it is. Here's our form. So I can say this is Chad's awesome test. We will submit it. And there it is. This is Chad's awesome test in reverse. So that concludes the web application activity in C#.